Hi, I'm Nate Seberg, and this is One Day Ahead. Welcome to Of Mice and Men, Chapter 2. If you're a teacher, check out onedayahead.com, where you will find all of this series, videos about teaching it, and a full unit beside. Finally, this is not a spoiler-free video, fair warning. But if you're good to go, then check for lice and slip on your glove as we dive into Of Mice and Men, Chapter 2. So if Chapter 1 is about introducing George and Lennie, Chapter 2 is about rounding out the rest of this world. And Steinbeck is going to do that by setting our guys up in a room and then walking in new characters one at a time. It's a little exhausting, if I'm honest. So now we are in the bunkhouse on the ranch. We have 8 bunks, apple boxes for the dude's stuff, and a table in the middle. George and Lennie walk in with our first introduction, an old ranch hand named Candy. Candy only has one hand, and he carries a broom, which that sounds hard, and he's wearing the hot new fashion of the day, blue jeans. He tells our guys that the boss was pissed when they weren't here early enough to go out with the morning work crews. This, of course, was exactly George's ruse. I love a good ruse, but they play it off like they got bad directions. George drops his stuff on one of the bunks, and he finds a yellow bottle tucked away in his apple crate. "Say, what the hell is this?" "I don't know," said the old man. "Says, positively kills lice, roaches, and other scourges. What the hell kind of bed you giving us anyway? We don't want no pants rabbits." I chose this quote because pants rabbits. Give this man a Pulitzer immediately. They actually did, but it was for the novel Grapes of Wrath, not for the phrase pants rabbits. Candy considers the bottle for a moment, then says, no, the last guy who slept here used this powder to prevent lice. Nothing to worry about. Now, some may call this response elusive, others optimistic, but I categorize it as lying. George doesn't buy it, but he settles in anyway. Next, they start talking about the only black character in this book, and they refer to him as the stable buck. Now, the top Google responses will tell you that this is a racist slur, but the term buck actually comes from the military, and it refers to rank. It means the lowest person in a particular category. So the buck sergeant would be the newest sergeant around. So here it means that this guy is the lowest of the stable hands. Now, he's the lowest because he's black. Let's be clear, but it's not in and of itself a racist label. What is racist and terrible is the N-word, which they also call him 16 times in 20 pages or something. So I'm not saying this book is a towering work of progressive race portrayal. I'm just saying let's be offended by the right stuff, you know? Anyway, this conversation stops when our second introduction walks in. He's called the boss, and he doesn't actually get a name in this novella, which is interesting. We only meet him here just long enough for him to be mad that they didn't arrive early to work and to be suspicious that George is taking advantage of Lennie. The boss hooked his thumbs in his belt and squinted one eye nearly closed. "Say, what are you selling?" "Huh?" says George. "I said, what stake you got in this guy? You taking his pay away from him? I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I'd just like to know what your interest is." George said, "He's my cousin. I told his old lady I'd take care of him. He got kicked in the head by a horse when he was a kid." Yikes. And the boss's suspicion says a lot. Like nearly everyone else in this book, he simply cannot accept that anyone could be motivated by basic goodness. He's like, what's the angle? Cut me in. It's a hard world, people. So the boss leaves, and Lennie asks for clarification on 2 points. Number 1, are we cousins? And 2, was I kicked in the head by a freaking horse? And it's no to both, by the way. Poor Lennie. Introduction 3 is a dog in very rough shape. Candy returns, and at his heels there walked a drag-footed sheepdog, gray of muzzle and with pale, blind old eyes. The dog struggled lamely to the side of the room and lay down, grunted softly to himself, and licked his grizzled, moth-eaten coat. We learn that Candy has had this dog since he was a pup. So the doggy leaves, and it's on to intro number 4, Curley. Curley sucks. He is a tightly wound ball of insecurity, self-doubt, and violence-seeking short-man syndrome. He's in the room 5 seconds before he correctly identifies Lennie as someone he can mess with. I'm not gonna get into how, but it gets tense, it gets sad, and then Curley leaves. Candy fills them in. "That's the boss's son," he said quietly. "Curley's pretty handy. He'd done quite a bit in the ring. He's a lightweight, and he's handy." He means he's a boxer. Handy means he's good with his hands. He can throw these hands, as the kids say. So here is someone who has been small his whole life, and it's given him a chip on his shoulder. So he seeks out bigger men and picks fights to prove to the world that he's tough. Nothing like beating up a mentally disabled man to prove you're not 5'4". As I've said, Curley sucks. And also, I know this doesn't matter, but do all these names have to start with the letter C? We have Candy, Curley, soon we will meet Crooks, Carlson, Lennie was raised by Aunt Clara. We never learned the boss's name, but it's definitely Connor. Anyway, Candy has one arm, Curley sucks, Clara's dead. Let's keep this moving. Seems to me like Curley's worse lately. He got married a couple weeks ago. Wife lives over in the boss's house. Candy continues. You seen that glove on his left hand? Well, that glove's full of Vaseline. Vaseline? What the hell for? Well, I'll tell you what. Curley says he's keeping that hand soft for his wife. Oh, that was gross. It's here that George tells us exactly where this book is heading. Well, he better watch out for Lennie. Lennie ain't no fighter, but Lennie's strong and quick, and Lennie don't know no rules. George is pretty sure they are going to tangle with Curley, and he reminds Lennie about where to hide if there's trouble, back at Chekhov's riverbank where this book started. Intro 5, Curley's wife. Quick note on her, she never gets a name. Seriously, the only female character who appears in this book, and Steinbeck doesn't name her. So I'm not going to go this whole series calling her Curley's wife. So in my class, we always name her. Next chapter, someone will call her a Lulu, which is 1930s for tramp. So in this series, we are going to call her Lululemon. I don't know. Candy says she has the eye, meaning she's a flirt. She's casting her eye around, maybe looking for something a little extracurricular in the married people department. And when we meet her, she lives up to the hype. She is playful, coy, flirty, and certainly the thing that will get this plot moving. Lennie thinks she's purty, so, stay tuned on her. Intro 5, Slim. So by all accounts, Slim is the man. Steinbeck paints him in almost religious terms. A tall man stood in the doorway. He moved into the room with a majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsmen. He was a jerk-line skinner, the prince of the ranch, capable of driving 10, 16, even 20 mules with a single line to the leaders. There was a gravity in his manner and a quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. His ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. So Slim rules. He's calm, deliberate, and kind to the new guys. He too is surprised to learn that Lennie and George travel together, but instead of suspicion like the boss, he registers warmth, admiration, and introspection. However, if you love this guy, and I do, you need to be willing to accept just a spot of puppy homicide. A ranch hand named Carlson, introduction 6, by the way, asks if Slim's dog gave birth last night. Slim's response, yep, 9 of them. I drowned 4 of them right off. She couldn't feed that many. Oh, it's a hard world, everybody. And it's getting harder, because next Carlson is like, listen guys, here's the plan. Let's kill Candy's dog, because he's just so old, and we'll give him a new puppy. And everyone is like, great plan, Carlson, good old homicidal Carlson. So the dinner bell rings and the men file out. And finally, as a button to end this scene, Curley pops back in angry, looking for his wife. Curley looking for Lulu and Lulu looking for Curley will be something of a trope throughout this book. These two people seemingly spend all of their time wandering around looking for each other. How big is this freaking ranch, by the way? There are only like 6 characters in the entire book, and 2 of them will not successfully reunite until one of them is literally dead. Curley continues his search, the men head to dinner, and that's chapter 2. So if we want to understand this book, we gotta get deeper than just plot. Let's do a little analysis. So first up, we learn Slim is a jerk-line skinner, the prince of the ranch. Cool. Also, what is that? Well, if you could skin someone in 1930s slang, it meant you could outsmart or cheat them. It means like break through their defenses. So a ranch would have mule skinners, people whose job it was to outsmart the mules to get them to work, mules being famously stubborn. So these guys were employed because they are smarter than mules. It's good work, fellas. But Slim is the jerk-line skinner. This is the big job. Imagine a team of like 20 mules pulling loaded wagons around the ranch. The jerkline Skinner rode the back left mule right in front of the wheel, and he would be holding 2 ropes, both of which laced through all the mules and attached to the leaders. In his left hand would be the brake line. Pull that, we stop. In his right hand would be the jerk line. This rope attached to the bridle on the left side of the front left mule. So let me back up. When you're building your mule team, front left is where you want your smartest mule. Straight A's through mule school, that is your front left. That mule knows that a long pull from the jerk line means turn left, that one's easy, but a quick jerk, that means hang a right, which is tough for a mule. It's like, I'm gonna go this way. So after the brain trust in the lead, your mules are essentially gonna get dumber the further back you go. And the last 2, including the one you are riding, they don't need any brain cells at all, but this is where you put your muscle. These last 2 are called the wheelers. They're there to get the wagons rolling in the first place. Something that big, fully loaded, is going to take a lot of force to get underway. Anyway, Slim's a jerkline Skinner. He's the man, if you're not a puppy. Next, I'm interested in the boss. When he turned up, I assumed this book was going to go vertical. I thought we were going to have the uncaring, moneyed, exploitative robber baron versus the plucky, salt-of-the-earth laborers who would band together, fight the fight, and though they would never strike it rich, at least they had their dignity and each other. But no, this is nothing like that. The boss doesn't matter at all. This book is horizontal. And forget about the workers bonding together. This book is about how we create a hell for each other. This is a book about the hard, cruel world. Here we drown puppies. Here we shoot the old, ignore the lice, and beat up disabled people. For a while, anyway. Here, every single character we meet cannot fathom acts of even basic decency if they are not motivated by money or power. Finally, let's do Curley and his nameless wife. Candy says that he bets Curley is eating raw eggs and writing to patent medicine houses. So that's weird. That's another 1930s cultural thing. They thought that eating raw eggs would make a man more virile, more potent, more sexual. And he's writing to medicine houses to see if anyone has invented Viagra yet. Hint, they have not. But combine all of that and his Vaseline glove, which is disgusting, his debilitating insecurity, his natural suspicion, and his flirty, floozy wife, and we have all the components we need for a hot mess, full-fledged dumpster fire, which we will get. And speaking of Lululemon, Curly's wife, I'd have you pay attention to the role of women in this book, because they don't get to do much. Aside from her, all other females are prostitutes, except for Aunt Clara, who's dead. And Steinbeck makes it clear that Lulu is basically prostitute adjacent. In this book, women are dangerous, wily, immoral, or dead caretakers. And I'd have you note that in Lennie and George's shared dream for the future, their version of a heaven they will one day inhabit, there are rabbits and there are crops, but there are not women. Steinbeck, not a fan of the ladies. And that's chapter 2. Thank you for watching. Next episode, we head to chapter 3, where George shuffles cards, Lennie stops a fight, and Carlson takes a dog for a walk. All that and more next time on One Day Ahead.